Okay, well, you can turn that off and on. All right, I guess I'm gonna try and do a thing. We're 3 minutes in, nobody's watching, and that's fine. Um, okay, let's get started. Apologies for the stark lighting. It's the best I can do with the camera that I have. Um, so here's the deal. I have last year, my wife and I bought a bunch of these novelty. I guess it's going this way. Huh? Novelty pumpkins. They're you should. I'm just gonna do a quick adjustment here. Let's try it this way. There's that. That's a little. All right. I think that's a little bit better. Here we go. It's a little rough, but you can kind of see that. This says battery operated LED flaming pumpkin. I don't know that you can see it because the battery's pretty low, but yeah, it's super low there. Essentially, what's in here is a bunch of LEDs and then a reflective, uh, some reflective foil on a motor, and it creates this sort of interesting effect that's supposed to look like a candle glowing. And we got a couple of these at a discount, and then we got a bunch of them at a super discount as the season was ending. And I want to show you sort of an interesting thing about these. Oops, pop that out. Do this over here. So I'm just going to pop out this. Got to make sure that my microphone is in fact capturing some of this stuff. So we'll pull the pumpkin out. The interesting thing, the sort of where this came from in the first place, the reason that I got this idea in the first place, we bought these pumpkins for our display. My wife really liked them, and they came with so the box obviously has this try me button, right? And on the bottom of the pumpkin, this is built into the design. It has this little 0.1 inch this little 0.1 inch header that you can plug into, and this little wire is a button with a battery pack attached to it. And if the batteries are charged, then you actually get, you can see the effect. And I think, depending on how crazy I want to be right at this minute, I might actually even be able to show you what that looks like. Let me see if I have something that I can plug in over here. You could tell I wasn't particularly prepared for this part. Actually, wait a minute. Here we go. So I've got, I have over here. I'll put that aside for a second. I'll show you what I'm converting these into. I've got, I think 7 of them done. So here's the finished product. You can't really tell what it is from here, but you see, I put these. They kind of look like XLR connectors, but they're not really. They're just keyed 3 signal connectors that the company that sells the LEDs provides. And I have a little test jig here. It's not a test jig. It's really just a microcontroller with the connector connected, and it's got a little test signal. But you can see. Maybe you can see. You can kind of see some of the test signal going there. You can see the LEDs running on the inside. But what I'll show you, it doesn't look as good in this light. And when we're done, we'll do a demo and we'll show you what it looks like. But I thought I would show you because I have a couple of cables here. I can show you what the intention is. Just have to get the right thing. Here we go. We'll just do this. This is probably a terrible idea to begin with. We'll do Let's see. See, the outside is going to be, we'll see. Hopefully we won't fry it. Hopefully we'll get it right on the first try, right? But if we supply it the actual amount of power we need and not just whatever's left in the battery, you can get kind of a cool effect. I'll bring this over here, and then let's see, blue and green. All right, so if we put that there, we put, there you go. You see that quite a bit better, and you can see sort of the effect that's going on when it's fully powered. Now, the idea is, as I said, there's a little motor there inside that's creating that effect. So I thought, hey, I could probably create something that will turn this off and on in sequence. And, at the time I was doing it with a microcontroller, and I was sort of handcrafting timings with the microcontroller to sync, and that did not work out. It was a very complex process, but I thought, well, I can figure out some sort of signaling and just switch these on and off in sequence, and that could be a pretty cool effect. Well, that's fun and it works. I could pursue that, but then I thought, well, I have this other problem. What about whether or not it is, weatherproof? We can't, put it out there all the time and then bring it back in. And obviously, they're just plastic shells, so water's going to get in them. And this was never designed to really sit outside in the weather. And I live in a part of the country that is pretty pretty wet during the Halloween season. I was thinking about, well, what can I do? And of course, I came back to every nerd's favorite tool of the last decade or so, which are these addressable LEDs. A lot of people call these neopixels. The name of the model of the LED is a WS2812B. Is very popular. There are a couple other variations on it, but essentially, it's a 4-pin chip. It's got takes 5 volts in. It's got ground, and then it's got a data in and data out, and they're very easy to sequence. And there are a lot of software has been written to work with them, which is what makes them appealing. And of course, then they also you can buy them in such a way that they're weatherproof. So this has I don't know if you can see it in the camera. Maybe I can. This has a silicone coating to it, which I think these ones are IP65 or 67. So they are waterproof, or probably highly water resistant is what we're actually talking about. But then they're also they've got a sort of a sticky back to them, compare them to something. So I'm going to open up this pumpkin and take out the guts. We're not gonna quite cut a hole in the top and scoop out the seeds, but that's kind of what I'm doing. And then I'll show you how I'm attaching the LEDs and weatherproof, how I put in the cables, the input and output. So we put them in sequence and have them talk to other pumpkins. And that's what I'm going to do. It usually takes me about an hour. We'll see how fast I can do it on video here. And I apologize for the heavy shadows. It's sort of the best I can do in terms of lighting. I did do this with my iPhone, not a live stream, but I captured some video with an iPhone, and the light pickup was quite a bit better. So I guess that's mostly a commentary on my webcam, but we'll do our best. Let's see. So we're going to start with, there are 4 screws. Actually, I discovered this very late. I was trying to, solve the problem when I was taking the handle off and on. I was opening it out and watching the handle just sort of spring out. And that's, of course, a ridiculous thing. You just pull one side out and then just pull the other side out. And it's very easy. You do have to be a little careful not to scratch the surface, but it's plastic and it's paint, and it's sort of the reality. You do need a long screwdriver to open these. This is a flat head, but the Phillips screws in here will accept it. I do also recommend that you get a plastic bag to store all of the internals. And just that, this is, I mean, I'm permanently altering this pumpkin, but I do like the idea that I could potentially convert it back. And, it becomes a question of like, well, why would I want to convert it back? I don't know, but inevitably you do, you want that option until you've learned to let go and that you're happy with the choices that you've made. But in the meantime, we'll save the internals, and as my wife suggested the other day, we could even maybe put them up somewhere else to create this flame effect. Once I have the pumpkin open, I'll show you how that effect works. It's actually pretty interesting. I know I described it, but the description doesn't really do it justice. It's kind of a clever mechanism. Get them all. I still got one in there. This is legitimately my first live stream, and there are exactly no people here. So what I expect to have happen is that maybe someone will come into this, come find this in the future, and that's where we'll get our comments on. But what happened was I recorded it on my iPhone, as I said before, and we'll need these later, so we'll put them over here rather than store them in the bag. I recorded something like this on my iPhone, and then I found that I had an hour of video that I didn't really want to narrate. So I thought instead I would do a live stream where I could just talk to myself and potentially anyone else who was interested. And there are a couple of screws here. It's really interesting. There's screws up here to mount this diffuser to the shell, but at the bottom where they want to mount the diffuser to the base, they used hot glue. So it's kind of unusual, but what I suspect happens is some novelty Halloween prop designer comes up with this, and then the next step is some other designer or some other engineer says, well, how can we make this cheaper, and how can we make it cheaper still? I'm very curious how this sort of thing is comes out. I'm curious. I'm curious who the designer is that makes these, and what they how do they arrive at this? We were visiting the Spirit Halloween store, and they had a couple of interesting things. But for the most part, I was a little underwhelmed, and I ended up at Home Depot, and I was tremendously impressed by the quality of the Halloween decorations they have there. Now that we got the shell off, I can show you again. Here's the diffuser as you see it, and I'm just going to pop this off because it doesn't, the hot glue releases pretty easy, and look, here's the hole that was punched through the diffuser, and I still have it. That's kind of interesting. That is garbage, though, of course. So I think if we go back to, let's see here, if we bring our little test jig over again, and I'm going to pull off a couple of these male-to-male DuPont connectors, these are called. And I'm just gonna come over here and loosen. That's the wrong thing entirely, wrong tool. I'm gonna loosen the the power and the ground. We're gonna put blue. We're gonna put blue in the ground cable. You can't really see that. I've got to put that on camera here. And then I'll do the same. I'll put this into the... You still can't see it because the overhead's not that great, but that's all right. We'll do our best here. So I'm just putting these connectors into my power and ground terminals that I have connected to this cable. We're going to put these in here. I think ground goes in the back, as I recall. And we'll just plug this in and I'll show you how it works. So, if we don't fry anything here. Okay, there you can see it. And that's a really good description. So there's some LEDs on this side, and then a little motor rotates these. It's sort of see these up close. They're just they're plastic foil, reflectors that have been cut into a shape. And that's one of the things that makes it sort of so appealing is that it's it's very simple. And it creates this really interesting effect. And if we put the diffuser in front of it, you get that nice flame effect, so-called flame effect. And of course, the LEDs are a little overpowering on this camera, but the effect in person is really interesting. I like it, and it's what attracted my wife to them in the first place. So I'm just going to plug these in over here just so they don't randomly touch each other and short out the circuit. We'll unplug that too because we don't need it. Okay, so now we're going to disassemble this. We're going to desolder, and most of this comes off. It's just screwed in, but we're going to desolder these terminals and remove the battery plate here. We'll turn on the soldering iron. And in the meantime, nicely, most of this stuff is screwed in. It's not even glued in place, which is kind of the thing that I expect to have happen. That screwdriver is a little too big, so we'll get a smaller bit head here. All right, let's go with that fits, right? Yes. Put that aside. My only complaint about the switchable head on this is that it can't reach into the deep pockets of the shell, which means I can't I can't swap this out, and I'm sure there are multi-head screwdrivers that have a long neck like that, but unfortunately I don't have one of those. So again, I like to collect this stuff because that's a nice enough effect that you might find yourself wanting it in the future. I don't know that I introduced myself. My name is Aaron. I am an electronics enthusiast, and I like the idea of being the guy that puts up the impressive Halloween display. I haven't been. I'm quite frankly more of a Christmas person than a Halloween person, but my wife loves Halloween, and this is a way that I can sort of get involved in Halloween too. And a lot of my previous lack of involvement is more about finding the right project, the right thing to participate in. I say that I'm like, oh, I'm not much of a Halloween person. This is not my first Halloween project by far. About 11 years ago, Halloween was that day, and I decided at the last minute that I wanted to make a Halloween display, and so I I I think we cut out a felt bat and we put some blinking LED lights in the felt bat, and I rigged up some cloth ghosts to. There's that zero point 0.01 inch header. I think it was really interesting that they added that. I mean, that's um, this particular prop at full price is something on the order of like $25. We didn't pay $25 for any of them. But it's interesting to me that they put that in because the only purpose that it serves, again, is for that try me button. But I guess that's the world that we're living in. I find it especially interesting that screws in place, but the on-off switch is just this little pressure latch. Anyway, just sort of an observation. So we did. We do Halloween. We try to do it every year, but it's not always the easiest thing. So it's nice to be able to come up with something, and it's a little bit hot still. Whoops. It's nice to be able to come up, with an idea. And my wife very smartly just knocking stuff over with my soldering iron cable, aren't I? Let's gather that stuff up, bring it over here. Let's make sure that we have all of the things that we need. We're missing a little black screw. We'll find it. The time will come and we'll find it. Okay, put this over here where it won't bother anybody. All right, so we've got our base. Oh, we gotta take off the back here, the battery compartment, because that's where our cables are going to come out. So my wife was smart enough to tell me that we needed to start planning for our Halloween display in August. So we'd have all of September to build it, and then by the time October came along, we would be prepared. And we have right now, I've built 7 of these pumpkins. We have 5 out in the backyard right now. They run from a system that is plugged into a Raspberry Pi. Right now, for the most part, and I'll show this when we're done, it's mostly candle effect. But the idea and the exciting thing that appeals to me is that we can sequence them. There's an open source sequencing program called Xlights that allows you to build effects and generate sequences and even sync them to sound. So we can make our jack-o'-lanterns sing to some sort of Halloween song. Okay, so we're going to make this into some sort of pumpkin with LEDs. And how are we going to do it? We're going to need some LEDs, just like this. We're going to drill a couple holes in here so we can pack our, we can put our cables, which we're going to get out right now. Here's a coupler to keep everything tight, even though, quite frankly, these are very snug when you put them together. Okay, so here they are, male and female. These come from a Chinese company. Specifically, the company's name is BTF Lighting. I bought these on Amazon. One thing that's always important as you go into this is make sure you have the coupler on the cable before you start working with it, because otherwise you put it aside. Here's the one I put aside before. You put it aside, you forget to do it, you drill the holes, put it up, you hot glue it, and then you can't put it in. You have to undo your hot glue, or worse, you have to desolder and then undo your hot glue, and then it's sort of a sticky, hot, terrible mess. Okay, so first thing, I'm going to drill a couple of holes in here, and the way I do that is I've got I don't even know what size this drill bit is. This is let's see if we can read it. Something 3/16. That's that is not a match for the the diameter of this cable, but it is something. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drill these holes, and then I'm going to take this, which is actually it's a deburring tool that I found in my dad's stuff. So, if you have one of those little curved deburring tools, you can kind of use that to clear out the space. But this provided, the taper on this provided a really convenient way to widen the hole and also get rid of the excess plastic. Um, you might be wondering, like, Aaron, why aren't you just using a powered drill? And the reality is I don't have one. I've got a corded drill, but it is much too powerful. For this project, and it's just as easy for me to hand drill these. Um, this plastic is pretty soft. I can get it done in just see, and now we're through. Kind of punch through and then pull back out, and you've got a little bit of plastic that you've torn out. And we're just going to do the same thing on the other side. It's totally awesome that I'm blocking the one camera view I have of where I'm cutting into and what I'm doing. Of course, the fact that it's low light to begin with really helps too, doesn't it? Okay, so there's that. I'm going to take this tool now and just sort of turn it in there and let the deburring magic do its work, and also widen the hole a little bit. And you can come up from the other side to clear it out as well. One of the things that I haven't done in this process is to remove the battery contacts in the weatherization, which means, they might get wet, they might just be exposed to moisture, and they might start to rust, and that's kind of a pain. The real trick about it, the thing that makes me sort of not want to deal with it. It takes a little bit of time, and the payoff is pretty low. But also, these contacts are bent, and they're bent in a sort of way that they have a little bit of solder, which means they're not going to slip through the pre-cut holes very well. And that just means like a little bit more work than I wanted to do. But if you happen to be doing something similar to this, you might consider doing that. So it's a good opportunity to check to see if the holes are big enough. This one is just fine. Let's deburr this just a little bit more. There we go. And this one's just fine too. So this is where, if you have a vise or something, it really comes in handy for sort of working in the space. And I do have a vise, so it's going to come in really handy. Let's see, this may actually improve the experience for the viewer, as they may have a little more visibility into what's going on. So the reason I say a vise is useful in this situation is because you can take your two cables, and you can set them, you can rest them, on the floor, and they'll be held up in place in the holes, and you can sort of solder them that way. But before we get into that, we need to do a little bit of preparation. And that is that we need to clip these wires. They're a little bit too short. I have written down somewhere how long I want these. Here we are. Okay, so I have a little bit of wire. Let me show you the design here. I got the vise out a little bit too early. Okay, so we have our WS2811 lights, LEDs. Excuse me, these are 2812s, 2812Bs. I'm going to cut off, I've been using 4. If you do something like this, you can use as many lights as you want, and you don't have to turn on the ones you don't want to. I started out with 4. It seemed fine, so we stayed with it. But of course, you can use as many as you can manage to wire together. So, one thing about this, like these are designed to be cut at every LED, and they are. I find when I try to solder them and I don't have a lot of lead to solder on, I get really annoyed. So what I've been doing is I've just been here's my privilege showing. Like I've just been clipping off and throwing away one LED, so I have a full pad to solder against. So ignoring this one, two, three, four, I will cut right here, and now I have full pads on that side, and I'm just going to clip off. Um, this LED and the capacitor associated with it. So it's going to sit like this. In this particular design, I've been having the input come in on the one side, on the right side, looking at the pumpkin, and go back out on the left. So before we get much further, I want to cut this. And I'm going to clear the pads on either side. This is just a normal X-Acto knife. Always be careful, pull it out. This is something I learned about needles. Is anytime you want to take a needle off, so you don't do anything with your hand, you just pop it out like that. Pull away either side, and then of course be careful. Now, when you're putting the cap back on, I always try to approach it like this, so that you can make sure that the blade ends up in the cap before you apply any pressure. I'm acting like I know stuff about tools. I don't. I make it up as I go along, and I think a lot of people do. The silicone, you bend it. If you cut into it, it comes off super easy. It's really easy to pull off. Um, just cut through right to the circuit board, and it just peels off. All right, let's see what we're doing here. So, obviously, we're not going to try and solder these directly. That would be a bit of a pain. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip a little bit of this. I think this is 18 gauge AWG wire. And actually, it may be worse. It may be smaller than that. This may be 22 or 24. At any rate, what I want to do is I'm going to measure out. I did a little experimenting. I decided that what I need is about 85 millimeters of wire, of these wires, and then I need to strip about 40 millimeters on this one, and then I need to have 12 millimeters exposed. So I'm just going to grab, and it doesn't need to be exact. It's not a big deal. You can kind of do whatever you want. The idea is just give yourself enough slack that you have something to work with. You may be saying, Aaron, that's not enough. This wire is not high enough gauge to provide enough power, and that might be true if we were talking about hundreds of LEDs, but we're not. I mean, I have 10 of these jack-o'-lanterns, which means I'm dealing with at most 40 LEDs, and we're not pushing through so much current that it's going to be a problem. Should do this in the stream here. I only need 3 wires, so I'm just going to get rid of this blue one. Same thing on this side. Just going to split these so they're easier to work with. Oops. Get rid of the blue. Okay, so you're going to want a pair of wire strippers, and I have this pair of wire strippers, but really any wire strippers you have should work. I have mine set to 12 here because they're automatic, and that's very nice. I'm just going to pluck off. That sounded really awful. I'm going to pull off these about 12 millimeters of material. And do the same thing on this side. Okay. I'm not going to pull this off yet because I pull it back down to just 1 millimeter on that side, but I want to do it on these three as well. It's not super critical to keep these all together. When we get a little bit further into the process, I end up I end up pulling them apart anyway. But in the near term, it's nice because they don't wander away while you're trying to glue them or trying to solder them, something like that. We'll just make sure that these are a little bit spread out. Now we want to make sure that we also do it on this side. This is not the best approach to doing this sort of thing, but it's the one that works for me. There's probably a better way to do this. And if you find a better way, leave a note in the comments. So I'm going to strip off. So I measured about 40 millimeters tip from the tip of the wires here, and that's where I'm going to just remove this jacket, the insulation jacket. If you have really fancy, wire strippers, or there are tools that will strip the insulating jacket off of the wire bundle that you're using. I have one of those, but as near as I can tell, it's not adjustable, and it has just bit into the insulation on the the conductors internally, and that just is not. It's not worth it to me. Let's see. So you might see, if you're doing this, you might see a little bit of white powder come out of these, and that is talc. Talc it's not dangerous. It's used commonly in all kinds of things, including makeup. But there have been a lot of concerns about it in the past. So what I'd recommend, of course, doing anything like this, what I'd recommend is wash your hands. Wash your hands when you're done. I don't, it's not something where you need to wear gloves while you're doing it, but it doesn't hurt to wash your hands. I'm going to pull the 12 millimeters again of insulation off of these. It's a little bit harder because these are thicker. And also they're pre-soldered at the ends there. But okay, it's kind of easier if you just twist these together, so you can poke them through the holes there at the top. Okay, I think we're about ready. The next thing I'm going to do here is take off this adhesive backing. Again, I like to make sure that I'm going from the right-hand side to the left, but check to make sure that these arrows go the right direction. You don't want to accidentally put them in the wrong way. And we're just going to put it right here at the top of the battery box. And with that, we can bring the triumphant return of the vise for our convenience here. I'll bring it a little bit closer to the camera. All right. So this is a pan of ice, which is, it's really convenient that I have it. If you don't have anything like this, it's okay. It's not gonna cause you that much trouble. My preference for how to do this is actually we're not going to do this part yet. Ignore that. We're going to solder on these cables, which I don't know what to call them. They're things. And to start, what we're going to do is we're going to grab some solder, and we're just going to fill up these pads with some solder. My soldering iron is starting to tell me that I'm not using it and it's going to turn off. I foolishly forgot to put on my safety glasses. Let's try this again. There we go. I think if you have adequate ventilation, you don't necessarily need to wear a respirator, but whenever you are soldering, please wear eye protection. You only get one set of eyes. Some people do not get any eyes. So if you have eyes, be grateful that you have them and protect them. Here's a fun story while we're soldering. I once was at a meetup, sort of a geeky technology meetup, and I think I brought my 3D printer. Maybe I just brought my part of it, but a friend of mine was helping me um, take care of something. And he had an electric drill with him, and he was drilling into my. Hang on, just a second. There we go. My soldering iron dropped out of temperature here. He was drilling a hole, and a piece of plastic leapt out, and it got into my eye. This is many years ago now, and it was there for a day or two before I finally managed to get it out. And it was not a small piece of plastic either, and it was very troubling. And unfortunately, it did not hurt my eye, but obviously, it very much could have. All right, so now what we're going to do, we need to clip the other ends of these, don't we? Not clip them, but strip them. So move the guide there, just to make our job a little bit easier. Here's that. We'll do the other side too, because it's easy. Oops. We shall see if my soldering skills are very good. One of the things that you probably want to do is just twist the ends of these. You can use solid core wire if you want, but I generally don't recommend it. I would recommend getting stranded and then twisting them together. It makes for a much more flexible cable. Although in this case, you don't really need a flexible cable. You can use a solid core, and it's not going to move. It's not going to move when we're done with it, right? I'll show you. You don't know that now, but I will show you. Sometimes you can twirl it and make a nice tight group. This seems like a lot of exposed wire, and you might be wondering why, but we're going to join it with these, and I'll show you what that looks like when we do it. It's getting nice and hot, the hot glue gun is. So let us solder these in. We'll start with this side. Okay, here's the ground. We'll do the okay. Nope, we didn't get the data in. Let's see if we can. Sometimes I will use my pair of tweezers to sort of hold the wire in place while I apply heat to the solder directly, and then we can go over it with a little bit of solder additionally after it's sort of connected. And if some of the insulation melts or something, don't worry about it. We're going to cover all of this with hot glue as it is, so it'll be just fine. Oops, we lost it. We lost it when we were putting some more solder on. Just want to make sure the connection here is good and solid. All right. Those look pretty good. I always like to check with my multimeter after I do something like this. Make sure that it's, I'm not crazy, that haven't, I don't have a short in here somewhere. So we'll just turn this on. Check grounded data. Check ground and ground. Grounded data. Ground data and voltage. Okay, looks pretty solid. All right, and now we get to go through that all over again. And here's our other one. 5 volts, data and ground. Again, I'm going to twist the ends of the wires here because why not? Well, I can tell you why not. The reason, no, I can't tell you why not. I can tell you why. The reason why is because it's going to make it a lot easier to solder. It's going to make it so, if it starts to fray while you are soldering, it's not going to, solder to the other pad, which is quite close. All right. I was doing this the other day. I don't remember if it was one of these or if it was a different project, but I was trying to use my pinky finger to guide one of the wires, and I realized I touched the soldering iron. It was very hot and very painful. Oops, there we go. So always be careful when you're working with your soldering iron that you don't accidentally place it where you don't intend to. Okay. I'm going to put a little bit more solder on some of these for the same reason I did it before. And of course, I'm going to need to hold them in place too. Okay. Do a little bit more on the ground. The data line, well, sure, let's do data as well. So I think, nope, it's okay. I thought for a moment the data line had gone, had shorted with the ground, but I think it's all right. Okay, there we go. Right. Again, we'll test this side as well. Okay. Oops. All right. Okay, and this side. Okay. Had a successful test. Okay. And now we're going to get into the sort of interesting part, which is the weatherproofing. So the way that I like to handle this is I'm going to put hot glue on these sides and then fold these back like this. And we'll make sure that there's hot glue over all of the contacts as well as right up to the silicone edge here. So get out your trusty glue gun. Just this like this. And I think that's visible. There's no shame in using a lot of hot glue here, so don't be afraid. This particular approach is mostly to make sure that the this connector is covered, of course, and then also to provide some strain relief, because this can be as you're messing with it over the next little while, it is going to take some beating. So I like to hold it there for a minute. while it cools, and you can kind of see. I think you'll be able to see it on this video. I'm not sure, but you can see it sort of get cloudy and start to see it get solidify. And if you put a pile of glue here and um, it looks messy or terrible or whatever it may be, don't worry about it. Nobody's going to see it. I was just commenting tonight or yesterday, that one of my favorite things about Julia Child, of all people, is that she wasn't afraid when things went wrong. It's okay if things go wrong, and it's okay if things go wrong and they look ugly. It depends on how much you're trying to impress people. Nobody's going to see the inside of this thing. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to switch. I'm going to rotate over here. We're going to do the other side. Put some on the top too. And if you get strings, don't worry about it. You can always clean up the strings later. I did forget to say one thing. As you're working with your soldering iron, be careful about hitting the silicone. Silicone gives off a pretty nasty smell when you hit it with the heat. So be careful about how close you get to that. Okay. We are making progress. All right. So what we're going to do is while we let that cool, we're going to poke our connectors um, through the holes here. I like the input to be the ingoing connector, so the female end, and the output to be the male end. That's just an easy way that I remember which way is which, because you don't want to accidentally, make half of your pumpkins have a connector that is in, and half of the pumpkins have a connector that's out. Also, if you happen to have a setup where you are, you're dealing with multiple voltages. I'm dealing with 5 volts here, and I've just decided to go with 5 volts. But if you're working with 5 volts and 12 volts, what I recommend, what you might do, is get 2 different kinds of connectors. For your 12 volts, you could use a 4-pin connector, and for your 5 volts, you could use a 3-pin connector or something like that. You'll end up with an extra connector, but you won't ever be able to plug in the 5-volt system to the 12 volt, and that's kind of the goal. Okay, so I'm just trying to place the insulation jacket, the black jacket on the outside, um, kind of right at the bottom. This is why I was saying that having a vise is really handy in this situation, because you can stand these up. You just sort of set them on the table under the vise, and then you can have the vise hold your base in place. You won't have to worry about the cables falling through. I do like to give just a little bit of space. I don't know if you can see it. You can kind of see a little bit of the jacket above the hole, and that just makes things sort of that much more solid. You do want them to be covered a little bit. So we're just going to put some hot glue around the back and around the front, and then just kind of work. You don't have to put a lot on. This is mostly the cables themselves are already waterproof. It's plastic insulation. It's not. If water gets on it, it's going to be fine, and it's not going to get into the cables through the insulation. I'm pulling this off because it's. Should move this back a little bit, huh? Let's move that back just a tad so it's a little more visible. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And again, if you get strings, don't worry about it. You can clean them up afterwards. Nobody will know. Or as the TikTok craze goes, who's gonna know? Nobody's gonna know. They're gonna know. They're not gonna know. All right, so we're gonna let those set for just a minute, and you might, if you don't like the positioning for some reason, you can always mess around with it, and it'll be okay. As the glue starts to solidify, you probably don't want to mess with it too much, but it'll be fine. Once that settles, I'll point it up towards the camera, and you can see what that looks like. I was going to do it after I said, I'll wait until it solidifies. While we're waiting for that to happen, I'm going to clip a little bit of heat shrink. This heat shrink is, I was trying to remember what the diameter was. Heat shrink is about 8 millimeters in diameter, which I find is a good size for what we're going to do. This is a cool trick that I learned on YouTube about how to weatherproof a splice like this. So first, we're going to take some. We're going to clip some of this tube. You're going to need 2 of each color. You don't have to color coordinate. I like to, just for the sake of doing it, the sake of having matching colors to your cables. These don't have to be super long, but they do have to be long enough that they cover the space. So I would say let's take a look. How long are these? How long did I cut these? About 25 to 30 millimeters. Okay, that's pretty solid. That one's moving a little bit, so we'll give it a little more time. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to splice these cables. We are going to we're going to solder them together with the cable that on the correlated side, and then we're going to solder them. We're going to put hot glue on them, and then we're going to put the heat shrink around the hot glue, and then when we shrink the insulation here, the heat shrink, it's going to heat up the hot glue, and the hot glue will fill that tube and ooze out the sides, and you'll have a really decent um, weatherproof connector. Now, if you do this wrong and you need to undo it, it is a real pain in the neck. But um, I've done that once, by the way. So that part's no fun if you do it wrong. So pay close attention. You can test your connections before you commit them. So um, do a quick check, and maybe we'll try to do a quick check here too. So this looks pretty solid. Okay, so we'll do it on this side first. And sort of bend this out of the way. This is another neat thing that I learned online. Should go look for. There's a NASA technique for splicing wires, which is why I was saying this is why we strip so much of the insulation back, is because about how we're going to splice these wires together. So if you don't like hand twisting these, you can get a pair of pliers and twist the pliers, and sometimes it comes together a little bit nicer. So it's a kind of an easier thing to do when you haven't committed it, you haven't soldered it to anything. But um, there's, if you really hate hand twisting those, you can absolutely do it with a pair of pliers, and then, if you have something to grab onto the other end. Another thing, I could just take the whole base out and twist the base. That kind of helps too. Anyway, this is what we're going to do. So make sure that this is visible. I'm going to try and make sure. The way that this works is, and you can pull your wires a little bit further apart. You're going to cross them almost at the base, turn them around each other, and then you're going to do your best to sort of wrap them around each other. The NASA, if you go look up like NASA wire splicing, there's some really good illustrations of it that show just sort of what the goal is and how it works. And wrap it together. I think maybe I can pull this out and hold it up to the camera here. You can kind of see it right there, how they're wrapped together. And then if you solder that together, it's a really decent joint and really, a good solder connection. And you don't have to worry about when I've done this in the past, basically you get a pair of helping hands, you can kind of get them to position the wires close together and then hope that they'll stay in place while you apply the solder and while the solder cools. And this just makes it a lot easier to deal with. If you do like solder the wrong, like if you solder ground to data or something, you can also like, even though these have a lot of solder on them, you can always like heat the solder up with your iron and just like yank one wire out. It's not too difficult. We're gonna do the same kind of thing with this second wire here. And of course, the first wire is still hot, so let's see. And we'll do the same with the third one. All right. So there we go. That's pretty decent. Again, we'll solder these together. Whoops, that one's slipping a little bit. Okay. All right. Oh, and I just realized I didn't put the heat shrink on them. So now I get to demonstrate how easy it is to take these apart. Again, you just apply the heat and you can pull it out, pull it off. Gotta do on this side as well. All right, and this last one as well. Now, that was mildly embarrassing, but we will try and learn that lesson for next time. I'm gonna pull these a little bit further apart. Again, if they break apart, no big deal, because they don't need to be together. It's not that big a deal. I don't have a black heat shrink insulation, so I've just been using this white. It doesn't matter. But But it is nice to have some uniformity, so that, at the very least, you can look at and say, oh, this is supposed to be the red one, the voltage, this is supposed to be the ground, and this is supposed to be the data. Um, White, when you don't have black, is very common for a ground. It's also pretty common for voltage, so pick a color and stick with it. Oops. Trick can be, now that you have solder applied on both sides, that it's a little bit harder to work with these wires, but once you can get them heated up and the solder reflowed on them, they come together quite nicely too. All right, let's try this again. There we go. One thing you want to make sure that when you're working with like soldering, and you're making a closed connection like this where you can't slip on a piece of insulation, you want to make sure that you get the insulation far enough away from the iron that it doesn't start shrinking before you're ready for it to. Pluck off this side as well. We will twist these. All right. These are a little bit twisted anyway. Let's be sure to put on our insulation on this side before we get too far. Okay. All right, so this is what we want to do. Okay. Do a little bit of soldering. While we're doing this, and the commentary isn't very interesting, I will tell you that I think my very favorite Halloween movie is Garfield's Halloween, which I find really delightful. And I never saw it when I was a kid, but I did remember hearing about it on a podcast and checking it out and being absolutely delighted. I'm going to plug in my test jig here and make sure the lights work before we add any more hot glue. All right, and again, this isn't sending sequenced information, it's just a light test. And it looks like blue, looks like it is working. Red, blue, green. Oh, I mean color wheel. All right, this is what that looks like. Yeah, okay, great. So that works great, which is excellent news. And we are nearing, this is sort of we've got the difficult stuff done, I think. And we just kind of need to make sure it's fully weatherproofed, and then we can get the shell back together. And we have moved through way more hot glue than I expected to recently. I'm glad we have this bag of hot glue sticks. This is not, one of the interesting conversation I was having with my wife earlier, which was I wondered if there were, sort of luxury or high-end hot glue guns that, were so impressive with their set of features or their behavior that, they cost a lot of money and they were really worth it for the serious glue gunner. And I wasn't sure that there was. It seemed like there would be, but it also seemed like crafting was not an untapped market, that was waiting for disruption. Um, and that, if such a thing existed, that we would know about it. Um, I did come across, though, some pretty impressive glue guns randomly while I was searching online. And they have things like swappable tips and really fast heat up times and adjustable, adjustable heating temperatures that aren't just limited to hot and not as hot. What I'm doing here is, I'm applying hot glue to the top, obviously. Um, what I like to do is do that on the tops, and then once that's cooled, flip it over and apply it to the bottom because there's just not really an easy way to cover both ends. Top and bottom simultaneously, I mean. I think we're done with our soldering iron, so we can turn that off. Been going for an hour and 15. I guess I can't go top speed when I'm doing a live stream. All right, so these are, for the most part, they're pretty cool. So we will try and fill in I wonder how close I can get. Kind of run out of light up closer to the webcam, can I? And I'll tell you, one of the tricks about this is if you have too much hot glue or it doesn't go where you like, you can always like cut it off. Especially like I found a pair of my dad used to call them dikes, but I think of them as wire cutters. You can you just use a pair of wire cutters or dikes or scissors even anything with a halfway decent blade to clip the excess off, and that'll come in handy when we get to the heat shrink part two. You're trying to get that insulation over the top. If you miss a spot, it's okay because again, we're going to be putting the heat shrink tubing over these and then heating them up, which should um, cause the hot glue to reflow. I do like to do my best to get around them just for the sake of just in case. I mean, it's going to be there's a point where you don't really gain anything by being super fancy about it, but um, you want to minimize your risk as much as possible. Just wait for those to clear up a little bit, or I should say, wait for them to cool down a little bit. Oops. I mean, they're not super hot right now, but okay. All right, we're gonna put that right there. Put that right there. And try and slide your insulation over the top. Um, And I'm not going to say like more hot glue is better, but you do want to minimize removing. Here's a little spike of hot glue that you can clip off here. I will say more hot glue is better. I think that's, if there's more hot glue surrounding your joint, then it's more likely going to, protect it. All right, so there's that. Okay, and one more. This one might be a little bit tricky. The other thing I do sometimes, if I can't get it by pushing, is I'll get my pliers, little needle nose pliers, and see if I can get a hold and pull it on. Okay, so now is where the magic of weatherizing happens. We're going to get out a heat gun, and I have a heat gun that is, as near as I can tell, designed explicitly for shrink wrap. You don't need that. You can use any heat gun. I'm hesitant to say this, but I think a sufficiently hot hair dryer would probably work. But I'll try and do this in such a way that you can sort of see it. I don't know if it will be visible from the camera, but we'll try. So what's going to happen is we're gonna shrink these. The hot glue will warm up, and you start to see it ooze out, and it gets hot to the point where it'll ooze out and then sort of drip, and it looks kind of gross, but who cares? You need to spend just a little bit of time on each one until you start to see. You'll see the hot glue start to sort of bubble and come out the ends. You can see it over here, and you can see it right here, and that means you've accomplished your goal. Move on to the next one. And if you hit more than one at a time, it's fine. I like to do it because I like to make sure that it's fully shrunk and accomplished before so I don't miss something. But let's move on to the other side. So we have 5 pumpkins, 5 of these jack-o'-lanterns out in the backyard, which is right up next to a street. And I was a little concerned that whether or not this was going to hold in the weather. And the day after we put them on, we had a torrential rainstorm. Just for a couple of days, and it really it really proved out how effective this technique can be. Okay, I think we got them all. So we're going to put this down here. All right. Okay. Again, like I said, you'll get it'll really start to drip out of the ends, and that's it looks kind of gross, but it's fine. That means that it's working. Now's a good time to check to see, if you have a good seal on the backs, the sides where the cables come in. And generally speaking, we've got a good setup here. So I think what we're going to do is we'll move the vise, and we'll see if we can get the shell back on. If you want, you can reattach. You can like take your heat gun or even your soldering iron and warm up this hot glue and reattach the diffuser that way. It's not necessary. I find that it kind of fits just fine with no issue. I want to say like we chose these pumpkins because we had them and they sort of had the effect, and that's where this started. But you don't have to use this. There are lots of jack-o'-lantern um, type props available. One of the things that I have been eager to do, and I've been contemplating, is taking one of these craft foam pumpkins that we got at the craft store and carving that how I wanted to, and then putting some of the LEDs sort of in the top here, so that it reflects down and you can't see it, and the wire would come down the back. And um, you could do that, or you can take any plastic Halloween pumpkin jack-o'-lantern that you can find anywhere would work just fine, provided that you can shine a light out of it. So don't feel like you have to replicate this. This was just sort of a convenient thing that worked for me. But you can do this on anything. Conceivably, you could do this on you could do this on a real pumpkin. You could carve a pumpkin and you could seal it up using some urethane or something like that, and then add in some LEDs. That would be an interesting prop. And if you did it right, and I don't know anything about this kind of stuff, so take that with a grain of salt. But I think if you did it right, you could keep that prop for quite a while. I gotta remember what I did with all of our screws. We put them over here, and then we ignored them. Okay, there is one of our little black screws. Let's see if we can find the other. It's the embarrassing part where I can't find the other black screw that I need to assemble everything together. Oh, there it is. It's slipped under the frame that I've got the webcam mounted to. All right, so we've got these. I'm just going to very quickly put these in here and tighten them. We'll see if they fit in the screwdriver. Oops. And we'll do the other one too. Honestly, the cross tip that I have, the Phillips that I have in the screwdriver is too big for these screws, but I don't intend to take this apart very much. We already tested the lights and they worked. We could probably test them again since now that they're waterproofed, but maybe we should do that before we get everything back together. Oops, that's the output. All right. Okay. And okay, it looks like that's working just fine. If we turn this around, you can see a little bit of light coming through. All right, so we will disconnect that. We'll finish assembling our jack-o'-lantern. Now I have, after this one is done, I have 2 more of these to do. And I thought they were going to get faster, but I really think that my best speed is about an hour. And that's if I have everything really well organized. Ooh, screw our screws back in here. I initially thought about removing the diffuser, but with the battery box back there, it just doesn't look very nice. The diffuser really gives it sort of it softens the reality of the plastic. My wife commented that when we're done with these, the pumpkins have legs too, so they can stand up and do, do, do. All right. Maybe wondering why I decided to do a live stream on Friday evening, starting at 11 o'clock, and the answer is I don't know. I guess 10:45 maybe. Going on for an hour and a half so far. We are almost done. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. The last one in here. So the rainstorm that first weekend really proved out how well these work. They still work. I'm very pleased with them. So let's do this. This is what we're going to do. We'll move this stuff over. We'll attach the handle here at the end. So as I displayed earlier, the input works. We'll also want to check that the output works. You can see there's the light going on there. We'll grab another one of these that I've already done, and we'll plug in the input to the output and make sure that we get lights. I have occasionally had these where I plug in an input to an output and it doesn't work, and it's not really clear why. And I don't have answers for why that's the case. I'm going to turn off the lamp here, and you can really see it. Now, of course, like the real cool opportunity here, they don't have to be this close. There are, I have extension cables that work. So here's the one we just made. Here's the one that I had before. And again, this is just a test program. The really fun thing that you can do with this is I'll leave it plugged in so you have something to look at while I finish up here. The really cool thing that you can do is you can get a Raspberry Pi, get a copy of a program called Xlights, and you can work on sequencing this. So it's not just a matter of using the it's not just a matter of sending light signals just for kind of a cool light display like this, but you can actually sequence it to music, and there's a candle effect in X lights that does a pretty decent candle effect, and you can make it really really windy candle or a very still candle that just does very slight changes. But that's sort of the next step once I have all of the pumpkins out, is that we we sequence them to light. Right now I'm working on the sequencing for This Is Halloween from The Nightmare Before Christmas, and also for narration and song from The Haunted Mansion. And the one thing I was going to do beyond that was some jokes. We were going to tell some jokes and have the jack-o'-lanterns. This one, my son's favorite joke is how do you scare a panda with some bamboo? So you could have one pumpkin tell it and the other pumpkin respond. Sort of light up as with talking. Anyway, It's been an hour and 33 minutes. We built a pumpkin. We updated the pumpkin to use some of this controllable LEDs, and I hope you learned something. Um, if you find anything interesting or have any suggestions, leave something in the comments. And I hope that you have a nice day. Thanks.